Lisa, a social media sensation, with a following that could rival the most powerful politicians, had her heart set on Steve Adebayo. He was everything she'd ever wanted: handsome, charming, and from a family with immense wealth and influence. Chief Christian Adebayo, Steve's father, was a man of immense power and prestige. He had a reputation for being ruthless, and he was dead set against Lisa's union with his son. He believed she was nothing more than a social climber, using his son to elevate her status. "You can't marry her," Chief Adebayo had told Steve. "She's a gold digger, only interested in your family's wealth." But Steve was in love. He ignored his father's warnings and continued to see Lisa. Lisa, in turn, was determined to win over Chief Adebayo, no matter the cost. Lisa has access to Chief Adebayo's dark secret that could tear his family apart. It was a secret so dark and shameful that it could destroy his reputation. Lisa knew she could use this information to manipulate Chief Adebayo into accepting her and Steve's union. "I have something you want," Lisa told Chief Adebayo during a clandestine meeting. "Something that could ruin your family if it got out." Chief Adebayo's face paled. He knew Lisa was telling the truth. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I want you to give your blessing to my marriage with Steve," Lisa replied. Chief Adebayo hesitated. He knew he couldn't let Lisa expose his secret, but he also knew that if he agreed to her demands, she could still use the information against him in the future. "Deal," he said reluctantly, his voice filled with resignation. Lisa smiled. She had won. But as she celebrated her victory, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that her marriage to Steve was far from over. Chief Adebayo was a dangerous man, and he would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. Chief Adebayo sat across from his son, Steve, in the opulent living room of their family mansion. The room was filled with the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and the air was thick with tension. "Steve," Chief Adebayo began, his voice low and menacing, "I've tried to warn you about Lisa. She's not who she seems." Steve rolled his eyes. He was tired of his father's constant disapproval. "I don't care what you say, Dad. I love Lisa." "Love?" Chief Adebayo scoffed. "Love is not enough, Steve. You need to understand the danger she poses to our family." "What danger?" Steve demanded. "She's just a blogger." "A powerful blogger," Chief Adebayo corrected. "She's brought down powerful politicians and CEOs with a single click of a button. She's not just a girl, Steve. She's a force to be reckoned with." Steve's heart pounded. He had heard rumors about Lisa's influence, but he had never believed them. Now, hearing them from his father, he was starting to feel a pang of doubt. "Why would she want to hurt us?" Steve asked. "Because she's ambitious," Chief Adebayo replied. "She sees our family as a stepping stone to even greater power. She'll do anything to achieve her goals, even if it means destroying us." Steve was silent. He knew his father was a man of great influence, but he had never considered the possibility that someone could pose a real threat to him. "I'm begging you, son," Chief Adebayo said. "Please listen to me. Find a more suitable wife, someone who won't put our family in danger." Steve looked at his father, his eyes filled with a mix of love and defiance. He knew his father was trying to protect him, but he also knew that he couldn't give up on Lisa. "I love her, Dad," Steve said firmly, "and I'm going to marry her." Chief Adebayo sighed. He knew he had lost, but he also knew that the battle was far from over. Lisa was a dangerous woman, and she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. Lisa sat at a dimly lit bar, surrounded by her friends, Susan and Rachiel. They were celebrating her recent triumph over Chief Adebayo. "How did you manage to get him to agree to the marriage?" Rachiel asked, her eyes wide with amazement. Lisa took a sip of her drink and smiled. "It was a bit of a gamble, but it paid off. Let's say, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse." "What is it?" Susan asked, his curiosity piqued. "I'm not telling," Lisa replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "But I can see he was very cooperative." Rachel and Susan exchanged excited glances. They knew Lisa was capable of anything. "I can't believe you actually did it," Rachel said. "You're incredible." Lisa raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. Her friends echoed her toast, and they clinked their glasses together. As they drank, they couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about Lisa's future. She was about to become a member of one of the most powerful families in the country. Steve sat nervously across from Lisa at a quaint cafe. He had been plagued by doubts since his father's warning, and he needed to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. "Lisa," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "Is it true what my father said about you?" Lisa's face softened. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Steve, I swear to you, everything your father has said is a lie. I'm not a dangerous person. I'm just a woman who loves you." Steve looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of deception, but he saw nothing but sincerity. "I believe you," he said, his voice trembling. "I just want to make sure that I'm making the right decision." Lisa smiled. "You are, Steve. We're meant to be together." Steve nodded. He felt a surge of relief and determination. He was going to marry Lisa, no matter what his father said. "I'll talk to him," Steve said. "I'll make him understand." Lisa squeezed his hand. "I know you will," she said. "And when you do, he'll see that I'm the best thing that could ever happen to him." Chief Adebayo sat at the head of a long mahogany table in the exclusive clubhouse. Surrounding him were his most trusted associates, men who had been loyal to him for years. "We need to find a way to stop this," Chief Adebayo said, his voice filled with anger. "Lisa is a threat to our family." One of his associates, a man named Victor, hesitated before speaking. "I think we should be careful," he said. "I've heard rumors that Lisa has connections to some powerful people." "Powerful people?" Chief Adebayo scoffed. "She's just a blogger. She's nothing." "I'm not so sure," Victor replied. "There are rumors that she has ties to a cartel known as the Order." Chief Adebayo's face paled. He knew that if Lisa was connected to the Order, he was in serious trouble. "We can't let her get away with this," he said, his voice trembling. "We have to stop her." "Perhaps we should try negotiating with her," Victor suggested. "Offer her a large sum of money to leave Steve alone." Chief Adebayo considered Victor's proposal. He knew he couldn't afford to provoke Lisa, not if she was connected to that kind of cartel. "You're right," he said finally. "We'll offer her a deal." But as he left the clubhouse, Chief Adebayo couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a dangerous game. He knew that Lisa was a woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. And if he crossed her, he might regret it. Chief Adebayo stood in the opulent living room of Lisa's apartment, feeling a mix of dread and resignation. He had come here to offer her a deal, to pay her to leave his son alone, but he hadn't expected the confrontation that awaited him. As he entered the room, Lisa stood up from a comfortable armchair, her face serene. But her eyes held a cold, calculating glint. Beside her was a small child, a little girl with her mother's striking features. "Chief Adebayo," Lisa said, her voice calm. "It's good to see you again." Chief Adebayo's heart pounded. He had an affair with Lisa in the past that lasted a short while, but never knew Lisa got pregnant. One of the reasons he's been opposing his son's relationship with her. "Who is this?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Lisa smiled. "This is our daughter, Jane. Isn't she beautiful?" Chief Adebayo's mind raced. If his wife found out about Jane, his family would be destroyed. He had always been seen as a devoted husband and father, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing everything. "You can't do this," he said, his voice rising. "You can't bring my family down." Lisa shrugged. "I'm not trying to bring your family down," she replied. "I just want what's best for our daughter." Chief Adebayo knew he was trapped. He had to do something, but he didn't know what. He felt a wave of despair wash over him. Desperate and cornered, Chief Adebayo made a terrible decision. He arranged for his son, Steve, to be kidnapped and taken far away from the state. He believed that this would force Lisa to back down and leave him alone. However, Lisa was one step ahead of him. She had been aware of his plan and had already arranged for Steve's safe return. When Chief Adebayo received a call from Lisa, his heart sank. "You know what I did, don't you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Oh, I know," Lisa replied, her voice calm. "I was the one who arranged for Steve's rescue." Chief Adebayo felt a wave of panic. He had been so focused on protecting his own family that he had forgotten about Lisa's connections. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice pleading. "I want Steve," Lisa replied, "or this thing you did could be added to the list of your many dark secrets." Chief Adebayo knew he had no choice. He had to do as Lisa said. He had already caused enough pain to his son. Chief Adebayo collapsed during a crucial meeting at Capital Group, his company. The stress of dealing with Lisa and the recent kidnapping had taken a toll on his health. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him. His wife, Mrs. Adebayo, and his son, Steve, arrived at the hospital, their faces etched with worry. "How is he?" Mrs. Adebayo asked the doctor, her voice trembling. "He's stable, but he's going to need rest," the doctor replied. "The stress has been too much for him." Steve looked at his father, his heart aching. He knew that his father's health had deteriorated since he had started dating Lisa. "Is it because of Lisa?" he asked the doctor. The doctor hesitated. "I can't say for sure," he replied, "but the stress of the past few weeks has definitely contributed to his condition." A few days later, as Chief Adebayo recovered in the hospital, he called his wife and son to his bedside. "I want you to know that I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice weak but determined. "I've made a decision." Mrs. Adebayo and Steve looked at each other, their hearts pounding. They knew this was important. "I give my blessing for you to marry Lisa," Chief Adebayo said. Steve's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dad," he said. "Thank you so much." Mrs. Adebayo smiled. She was relieved that her husband had finally accepted Lisa. "I'm so happy for you both," she said. Weeks went by as Steve and Lisa prepared for their wedding. One afternoon, seeking a moment of solitude, Steve decided to visit a nearby coffee shop. As he sat nursing a cup of coffee, lost in thought, a stranger approached him. A woman, dressed in a simple yet elegant manner, pulled up a chair across from him. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed to bore into his soul. "Hello, Steve," she said, her voice soft, but carrying a hint of authority. Steve was taken aback. He didn't recognize her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. The woman smiled. "I'm someone who knows your story," she replied. Steve's heart raced. He had been trying to piece together the events of the past few months, but he had never come close to discovering the truth. "What do you know about me?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman leaned forward. "I know your father and your relationship with Lisa," she said. The woman, who introduced herself as Carrie, revealed that she was a special investigator from abroad, working in partnership with the Nigerian government. She had been tasked with investigating Lisa's activities, and her findings were shocking. "Lisa is a blackmailer," Carrie said. "She uses her influence as a blogger to extort money from politicians and top CEOs. She threatens to ruin their reputations if they don't invest in her business ventures." Steve was stunned. He had always admired Lisa's intelligence and ambition, but now he saw a completely different side of her. "My father was also a victim?" he asked, his voice trembling. Carrie nodded. "He was one of her biggest targets. She was planning to take over Capital Group by causing harm to you after you have married her, thereby declaring you not fit to manage your father's company." Carrie showed Steve a series of phone records and call logs that proved Lisa had been in contact with a mysterious man. The man was likely connected to a criminal organization that had been helping Lisa with her blackmail schemes. Steve was devastated. He had been so blinded by his love for Lisa that he had failed to see the truth. "I can't believe she would do this to me," he said, his voice filled with pain. Carrie patted his shoulder. "It's okay to be upset," she said, "but you need to understand that she never loved you. She was only interested in your family's wealth." Steve knew she was right. He had been a fool to trust Lisa. "I'll never forgive her," he said, his voice filled with anger. Carrie nodded. "I know you won't," she said, "but now you have a chance to rebuild your life. You can be the man your father always wanted you to be." Steve looked at Carrie with gratitude. He knew that she had saved him from a terrible fate. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for everything." Carrie smiled. "You're welcome," she said. "Now go and be the best version of yourself." Steve, heartbroken and disillusioned, decided to call off the wedding. The revelation about Lisa's true nature had shattered his trust in her. He made peace with his father, who confessed about his past relationship with Lisa. "I'm so sorry," Chief Adebayo said, his voice filled with regret. "I never meant to hurt you." Mrs. Adebayo and Steve were shocked and hurt by the revelation. They had always believed that their family was perfect, but now they knew the truth. "How could you?" Mrs. Adebayo asked, her voice trembling. Chief Adebayo looked at his wife, his eyes filled with shame. "I was foolish and carried away by my wealth," he said. "I made a mistake." After a long and painful conversation, Mrs. Adebayo and Steve eventually forgave Chief Adebayo. They understood that he was deeply sorry for his actions. Lisa was arrested and charged with extortion and blackmail. She was eventually released on bail with a huge fine and was ordered to stay away from the Adebayos, also shutting down her blog site. She disappeared out of sight and no one heard about her anymore. Steve, feeling lost and alone, decided to leave the country. He traveled to Europe, hoping to find a fresh start. As he boarded the plane, he looked back at his hometown, a mix of sadness and relief. He knew that his life would never be the same, but he was determined to move on. As Steve settled into his new life in Europe, he began to rebuild his shattered world. He focused on his career, made new friends, and tried to put the past behind him. He knew that it would take time to heal, but he was determined to do it. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe and stay tuned for more interesting stories.